The night sky above the colony in New Hope shimmered with 2 silver moons. The wind moved gently through the tall grass, and small lights blinked across the fields. Tiny drones that kept watch while the settlers slept. It was supposed to be a peaceful night for the human colony. It was the last one they would ever know. At the edge of the settlement, a boy named Eli Parker sat outside his family's small dome home. He was 12 years old, tall for his age, with messy dark hair and a face that always looked curious. He liked to watch the stars before bed, wondering what kind of world were out there. Eli's father worked in the energy fields, and his mother was a medic. They always told him stories about old Earth, about ocean, forests, and skies full of clouds. Eli wanted to see Earth one day. He didn't know that his wish to see the stars would come true that very night, but not in the way he dreamed. Eli's little sister, Anna, came running out barefoot, laughing. She carried her small, glowing toy drone and spun it in the air. "You awake, Mom?" Eli whispered. Anna giggled and said, "You're not the boss, Eli." Her voice was light, full of life. In a few minutes, that voice would be the last sound he'd hear before everything changed. A low hum filled the air. The sound came from above, deep and heavy, like thunder that never ended. Eli looked up and froze. The stars disappeared behind a massive shadow. The object was huge, stretching wider than the colony itself. The ground trembled. Anna dropped her toy. It fell and rolled across the grass, its light flickering. Eli's mouth went dry. "Anna, go inside," he whispered. But before she could move, the night split open with light. Columns of blue fire fell from the sky, striking the ground like lightning. The air screamed. Eli covered his ears as the sound tore through the colony. Houses shattered. The drones in the sky exploded like sparks. People screamed. Eli grabbed Anna's hand and ran toward the dome door, but a shockwave threw them both to the ground. The sky was no longer black. It was red and burning. Figures stepped out of the light. They were tall, covered in armor that looked like bone and metal mixed together. Their faces were hidden behind masks with sharp edges and glowing orange eyes. The Vorcan, the galaxy's most feared hunters. Eli had heard of them in stories. Everyone had. They were said to be ancient predators from a world where only the strongest survived. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't make deals. They hunted. Eli pulled Anna behind him and crawled toward the house. His mother ran out, shouting his name. She didn't make it far. A beam of light struck her chest, and she fell without a sound. Eli's scream was lost in the roar around him. His father tried to reach them, but another flash came, and then nothing. Eli couldn't breathe. The world had turned into fire and smoke. He grabbed Anna's arm and ran toward the nearby shelter, but one of the Vorcan dropped in front of them, landing hard. Its armor hissed. The creature looked down at them with eyes that burned like coals. Eli froze. Anna whimpered. The creature leaned close, its mask clicking open just enough to reveal rows of sharp, black teeth. It spoke a single word in a deep, rough voice that Eli didn't understand. Then a second Vorcan appeared, larger than the first, carrying a strange weapon that looked like a net made of light. Before Eli could move, the net struck. He and Anna were caught, wrapped in a glowing web that stung against their skin. They tried to fight it, but the harder they struggled, the tighter it held. The Vorcan lifted them as if they weighed nothing and carried them toward the burning sky. Around them, other children were being taken too, crying, shouting, reaching for parents who were gone. The adults were left behind, broken, silent, or burning. The hunters didn't speak. They moved with the calm of creatures who had done this many times before. To them, this was not cruelty. It was nature. The strong took the weak. The hunt never ended. Eli's vision blurred as they were pulled into the light. Through the haze, he saw the colony shrinking beneath him, a field of fire and smoke. He saw the moonlight vanish as the ship's metal walls closed around them. Anna cried softly, holding his arm. He whispered, "It's okay, Anna. I'm here." But his voice shook. He wasn't okay. None of them were. Inside the ship, the air was cold and filled with strange smells, metal, oil, and something rotten. Dozens of cages lined the walls. Inside, each one was a child. Some were silent, some sobbing. Above them, Vorkin guards walked slowly, their eyes scanning every cage like farmers checking animals. Eli reached through the bars, trying to touch Anna's hand in the next cage. "We'll get out," he whispered. "We have to." But deep down he knew the truth. They were not prisoners. They were prey. The engines roared. The floor vibrated. The ship rose higher and higher, leaving the burning colony behind. No one would ever see New Hope again. And somewhere in the dark sky above, far beyond human reach, the Vorkan commander spoke softly to his crew. "Let the galaxy watch. Tonight, we feed the young to the wild." The ship broke through the clouds of a dying world. Beneath it lay a wasteland of jagged mountains, dark forests, and rivers that glowed faintly blue under a toxic sky. Lightning crawled across the horizon, and storms rolled like living creatures. This was Vorka, the home of the predators. Inside the ship, the cages rattled as the engine slowed. The children woke from restless sleep, their eyes red from tears and fear. Eli Parker gripped the bars of his cage, staring out through the cracks in the metal floor. He could feel the tremor of thunder below them. It sounded alive, like the growl of something waiting. The Vorkan soldiers moved through the hold, checking the cages. They were tall, powerful, and silent. One of them stopped by Eli's cage and tilted its head, studying him. Its armor was covered in marks that looked like claw scratches, maybe trophies, maybe warnings. Eli held his breath and stared back. He refused to look away. The creature's jaw flexed behind the mask, and after a moment, it walked on. When the ship landed, the floor opened beneath them. Cages dropped on the ground with heavy thuds. The doors opened one by one, and cold air rushed in. It smelled of dirt, blood, and smoke. The sky above was a dull orange, and twin suns burned weakly through thick clouds. A Vorkan commander stood at the edge of a cliff, watching the children stumble out. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "The hunt begins. Let the weak feed the strong." Then the soldiers left. They didn't explain. They didn't look back. The ship lifted off, leaving the children alone in the wasteland. For a long time, no one spoke. There were 23 children, maybe more. The youngest was barely 6. They stood together, shaking, staring at the alien world around them. The ground was black and cracked, and strange trees with silver leaves twisted in the wind. Far away, something roared, a sound so deep it made their bones feel hollow. Anna clung to Eli's arm. "They're coming back, right?" she whispered. Eli didn't answer. He looked at the sky, where the ship had vanished. He knew they weren't coming back. A boy with blonde hair, maybe 14, spoke up. "We should stay here. Maybe someone will find us." "No," Eli said quietly. "No one's coming." The boy glared at him. "How do you know?" Eli pointed toward the horizon. "Because this place, it's a test. They left us here to see what happens. And I think they want to see us die." The group went silent. Some started crying again. Eli looked around. Rocks, dark trees, the smell of rain and danger. "We need to move," he said. "We need food, shelter, anything." They walked for hours, their feet bleeding from sharp stones. The land sloped down into a valley filled with strange fog. Inside it, plants glowed softly, blue, green, red. It looked almost beautiful until one of the glowing plants moved. Long spines shot out from the ground and dragged a small animal into a hole. The children backed away fast. "Everything here wants to eat," Eli said. "We can't stop." They kept walking until they reached the stream. The water was dark but running. Anna bent down to touch it, but Eli stopped her. "Wait!" He threw a stone into the stream. The water hissed. Steam rose. Acid. By nightfall, the temperature dropped. They found a hollow under a fallen tree and crawled inside. It was barely enough for all of them. Eli sat near the entrance, watching the dark forest. He could hear movement out there, footsteps too heavy to be human. Eyes flashed in the distance, yellow and wide. Predators were watching. He whispered, "They're waiting for us to sleep." The older boy from before, the one who argued with him, leaned close. "We can't fight them," he said. Eli nodded. "Not now, but maybe we can make them afraid later." That night, the children barely slept. They listened to growls and howls outside. Once, something big brushed against a tree, shaking the ground. Anna clung to Eli, whispering his name over and over. He whispered back, "I'm here. I promise." But deep down, he didn't know if he could keep that promise. When morning came, the sun was pale and weak. The children crawled out of the hollow. 2 were missing, the little twins who had fallen asleep first. They didn't scream. They didn't run. They were just gone. No one spoke for a long time. The blond boy finally whispered, "We're all going to die here." Eli turned to face him, his eyes cold. "Maybe, but if we die, we don't die easy." He looked at the ground and noticed tracks. 3-toed, large, deep. He followed them with his eyes until he saw movement near the edge of the valley. A predator, taller than any human, with scales that shimmered like oil. It was watching them from the trees. Eli stared back. He didn't run. And in that silent moment, something changed. Fear turned into something else. A spark. He whispered to himself, "We can learn. We can fight." He picked up a long, broken branch and held it like a spear. It wasn't much, but it was something. The other children watched him, confused but hopeful. "Stay close," he said. "From now on, we move like hunters, not prey." The wind howled through the valley, carrying the growls of unseen creatures. Above them, the clouds rolled and lightning flashed like warning signs. The hunt had begun, but not the one the Vorkin expected. The morning fog hung low over the black forest. The ground was wet, and the air smelled like metal and ash. Every sound echoed. The drip of water, the creak of strange trees, the soft crunch of footsteps. Eli Parker led the small group through the narrow valley, holding a sharpened stick he'd made the night before. His hands were bleeding from the rough bark, but he didn't care. Behind him, Anna and a dozen other children followed silently. Their clothes were torn, their faces pale, but there was something new in their eyes. Focus. They had walked for 2 days without rest. Every hour, something hunted them. Shapes moved between the trees. Eyes glowed in the dark. The Vorkan didn't come back, but the world itself was trying to kill them. A strange creature screamed in the distance, high-pitched and sharp. The children froze. Eli raised his hand, signaling them to stay low. The sound faded, replaced by heavy breathing and the crack of branches. Out of the fog stepped a monster. It was tall as a human, but built like a nightmare. Thin limbs covered in spines, a jaw that opened too wide, and a tail that dragged to the mud. Its skin shifted colors like smoke. It sniffed the air and turned toward the group. Anna whimpered. The sound made the creature's head snap in her direction. It hissed, a sound like knives scraping together. Eli's heart pounded. He whispered, "Don't move." But the creature was already charging. He pushed Anna down and threw the stick with all his strength. It hit the beast in the shoulder, barely slowing it. The creature leaped, claws flashing. Eli grabbed a rock and swung. The claws cut his arm, but the rock smashed into its face. The creature screamed, stumbled, and fell against a sharp branch. It thrashed, screeching until it went still. The forest went quiet again. Eli fell to his knees, breathing hard. His hands shook. The children stared at the body. It didn't look dead. It looked wrong, like the planet itself had made it. One of the older kids, a girl named Mira, stepped forward. She was tall and quiet, maybe 15, with dark hair tied back with a strip of cloth. She looked at the corpse, then at Eli. "You killed it." Eli shook his head. "We all did. It was coming for us." Mira knelt beside the creature. She ran her fingers along its spines and found a sharp piece that had broken off. She held it up. "We can use these for weapons." Eli nodded slowly. "Good idea. Everyone, take what you can. But be careful. These things might be poisonous." The children moved closer, cutting off pieces of bone, claw, and hide. For the first time, they were doing something more than running. They were adapting. By nightfall, they had made crude spears and knives. The fog thickened again, and they built a small fire inside a hollow log. The warmth felt like magic. They ate wild fruit that Mira had found, bitter but safe. Eli looked at the fire and whispered, "We can survive this." The blond boy, the one who had doubted him before, frowned. "You really think we can fight the things out there?" Eli looked up at the sky. "They think we're weak. They think we'll die. Let's make them wrong." Mira smiled faintly. "Then we start training." Over the next days, they learned. They moved through the forest in silence, watching how the predators hunted. They saw that the creatures followed sound and heat. They learned to cover themselves in mud to hide their scent. They learned to use the vines that snapped like whips, the stones that sparked when struck. They began to set traps, holes covered with branches, sharp stakes hidden under leaves. It was slow work, but every time a creature died in one, they felt a little stronger. Eli became their leader, though he never asked to be. When someone was scared, he spoke softly. When someone was angry, he listened. Mira became his second, calm and careful. Together, they taught the others to fight, to think, to endure. One night, as the twin moons rose, the ground began to shake. The children hid behind rocks as something huge approached. Trees fell. The earth cracked. Out of the shadows came a beast 3 times taller than a man, with horns like broken blades and skin that glowed red beneath the surface. The Vorkan called it a night strider, a hunter that feared nothing. It sniffed the air and bellowed, shaking the valley. The children stayed still, waiting. Eli whispered, "Now!" They pulled the vines. A pit opened beneath the monster's feet, and it fell, crashing into spikes they had sharpened from the bones of the first creature. The ground split, dust rising into the air. When the dust cleared, the night strider was still. The children stared in silence. Then, slowly, Anna whispered, "We did it." Eli looked down at the creature, its black blood steaming in the cold air. He felt something shift inside him. Not joy, not relief, but purpose. He turned to the others. "They left us here to die, but this planet is ours now." The group cheered quietly, exhausted but alive. Mira stepped beside him, her face lit by the firelight. "What happens when the Vorkan come back?" Eli's eyes were hard. "Then we show them what humans become when they're hunted." In the distance, unseen in the dark, Vorkan scouts watched from their ships. They recorded everything. The commander reviewed the footage and spoke in disbelief. "Children," he said softly, "the prey learns too fast." The forest was no longer quiet. It had learned to whisper. Leaves rustled even when there was no wind. The air carried new smells, smoke, ash, and fear. Something had changed on Vorka, and even the predators could sense it. Weeks had passed since the children killed the night strider. Its body had fed the earth, and its skull now stood on a wooden spear outside the children's camp, a warning to anything that came too close. Eli Parker stood near that skull, his clothes torn and his skin streaked with mud and blood. He no longer looked like a boy. His hair was matted, his face marked by thin scars, and his eyes, once bright and curious, had turned sharp and cold. Around him, the others moved quietly, working on traps and weapons. They spoke in whispers. They had built small shelters from bones, vines, and metal scraps from fallen Vorkan drones. Smoke rose from their fires, blending with the mist that hugged the ground. This was no longer a group of scared children. It was a pack. Mira crouched beside a small pit trap she had made. Inside it, sharp spikes were coated with dark green sap from a plant they had tested on small creatures. It burned flesh like acid. She looked up at Eli. If they come from the west, this one will stop them. Eli nodded. Good. But we'll need more. They're watching us. He pointed to the cliffs above. At night, they had seen lights, red glows, moving like eyes. Vorkan scouts. They weren't attacking anymore. They were observing, studying. But the Vorkan weren't the only ones learning. Eli had noticed something. The predators on this planet followed patterns. They moved through the same hunting paths, marked trees with claw scratches, and avoided certain areas. He began to map them in his mind, turning the forest itself into a weapon. At dusk, he gathered everyone near the fire. We're not running anymore, he said. We've survived long enough. Now we hunt. The firelight flickered across their faces, tired, dirty, but determined. The blond boy, Jalen, frowned. Hunt them? You mean the Vorkan? Eli shook his head. Not yet. The beasts first. We take control of this valley. We make it ours. And so they did. For days, they studied the predators. They learned which ones hunted in packs and which hunted alone. They copied their sounds, mimicked their calls, and used them as traps. They discovered that the creatures feared fire and sudden noise. When the next monster attacked, it didn't find easy prey. It found chaos. Flames erupted from hidden pits. Spears flew from shadows. The children moved like ghosts through the smoke, striking fast, then vanishing. When the beast fell, the forest went still. Nothing dared move. Mira smiled faintly. They don't see us as prey anymore. Eli looked at the creature's body and said quietly, They don't see us at all. That's good. But far above the planet, the Vorkan command ship watched every moment. Inside, the commander stood before a hollow screen showing footage of the battle. He saw human children fighting with precision, teamwork, and strategy. He turned to his second-in-command. They adapt faster than any species we studied. The officer growled, They're just young. Give them time. They'll break. The commander stared at the screen. No, they won't. Back on the surface, the children had begun marking their own symbols on the trees. Simple carvings of circles and lines drawn with sharpened bones. They didn't know why they did it, only that it made the forest feel like theirs. That night, rain poured down in sheets and thunder shook the mountains. The children huddled in their shelters, listening to the storm and the howls outside. But this time, the howls weren't hunting cries. They were warnings. The predators were avoiding the valley. Anna lay beside Eli, whispering, They're scared of us. Eli didn't smile. Good. Fear means they'll stay away. For now. But he couldn't sleep. The Vorkan light still glowed on the cliffs, and deep down, he knew the real hunters hadn't forgotten them. 3 nights later, the Vorkan returned. They came silently. 6 of them, armored and armed with nets of light. They moved through the dark forest, confident, silent, deadly. But the forest was not theirs anymore. The first Vorkan stepped into a clearing and vanished. The ground collapsed, dropping him into a pit lined with bone spikes. His scream echoed once before it stopped. The others spread out, weapons ready, but then the fire pits ignited and smoke blinded them. Something moved in the mist. Small figures, fast and silent. A spear struck one Vorkan in the leg. Another fell when a stone trap crushed his helmet. They fired their plasma weapons wildly, but there was no target to see, just shadows and whispers. When the smoke cleared, 3 of them were dead. The rest fled, dragging their wounded with them. The children watched from the trees, their faces hidden behind mud and bone masks. Eli lowered his spear slowly. "They'll send more," he said. Mira nodded. "Then we'll build more traps." Jalen looked at the Vorkan blood on his hands and whispered, "We killed them." Eli stared into the forest. "They called us prey. Let them remember that the hunted can hunt too." The next morning, the Vorkan command received the report. Their commander listened in silence, his jaw tightening. 3 units lost, the officer said quietly. By children. The commander looked out the window toward the planet below. "Not children," he said. "Something else. Something new." And on the surface, beneath the twin suns, Eli stood on the cliff where the skull of the Night Strider still rested. The wind howled around him. He raised his spear high. The galaxy might have forgotten the children of New Hope, but Vorka never would, because now the predators had learned a truth that would spread across the stars. Fear evolves, and nothing evolves faster than a human. Years passed on Vorka. The planet that once tried to kill the children now obeyed them. The forest grew quiet when they walked. The beasts that had once hunted them now fled at their scent. The predators had learned that humans were not food. They were a warning. Eli Parker was no longer a boy. At 17, he stood tall, his shoulders broad, his eyes sharp and distant. His skin bore dozens of scars, each one a memory, each one a lesson. Around his neck hung a small chain made from Vorkan armor pieces, trophies from the hunters who once laughed at him. The human camp had grown into a fortress hidden beneath the roots of a mountain. Smoke rose from carefully hidden fires. The walls were made of bone, stone, and pieces of alien metal scavenged from the Vorkan drones. Inside, nearly 40 humans lived, fought, and trained. They were no longer the same frightened children that had been abandoned here. They called themselves the Wildborn. Every sunrise began the same way. A horn made from the shell of a fallen beast echoed through the valley, and the Wildborn began their drills. They trained with spears, traps, and stolen alien weapons. Mira, now 16, led the scouts, fast, silent, deadly. Anna, once the smallest child, was now a skilled hunter who could strike from shadows without being seen. Eli watched them all with quiet pride, but his mind was elsewhere. For months, he had been studying something the Vorkan didn't know they had lost, a piece of alien technology from one of the crashed ships. It was broken, its screen cracked, and its power fading. But inside it was something familiar, a signal device. He had found it buried under the body of a Vorkan soldier. The others had told him to leave it. He hadn't listened. Every night, after the fires dimmed, Eli worked alone inside a dark cave, lit only by a faint blue glow. His fingers traced alien symbols on the device's surface. Slowly, he learned what each meant. It had taken him 3 months to make it power on, and another 2 to make it send. Mira found him one night, sitting by the flickering screen. "Still trying?" she asked softly. Eli nodded. "Almost. Even if you fix it," she said, "who will hear us? They think we're dead." Eli smiled faintly. "Then let's surprise them." For the next week, the camp prepared for what Eli called the call home. They gathered every Vorkan battery they could find, connecting them with crude metal wires and coils of iron. Sparks flew, and the air smelled of burning ozone. Anna watched, wide-eyed. You really think it'll work? Eli didn't look up. It has to. On the seventh night, the device came alive. A faint hum filled the cave, growing louder until the ground itself vibrated. The blue light became white, bright enough to light the entire valley. Symbols flashed across the screen. Alien code, human letters, numbers, all blending together. Eli stepped forward. It's ready. The wild-born gathered around as he pressed a single button. The hum turned into a pulse that echoed into the sky. Somewhere beyond the clouds, beyond the storms, the signal broke free and traveled into the stars. Eli spoke into the device, his voice calm and steady. This is Eli Parker, survivor of New Hope Colony. We were taken. We survived. We are not prey. If anyone hears this, we're coming home. The light flared, then faded. The signal was gone. The cave fell silent. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Mira whispered, "Do you think they heard you?" Eli looked toward the sky. Someone will. They didn't know it yet, but across the galaxy, on the outer edge of human space, a listening station caught something strange. A transmission in broken human and Vorcan code. Static filled most of it, but one sentence came through clear. We survived. We're coming home. The signal spread like wildfire through military channels and scientific networks. The humans at first thought it was a trick, a Vorcan game. But when the decoded data showed coordinates to a forbidden planet, they realized it impossible. Someone on Vorka was alive. Back on the planet, the Vorcan commander watched the same signal through his command screen. His claws tapped the table in anger. "They sent a message," he growled. His second-in-command stepped forward. "Do we stop it?" The commander shook his head slowly. "No. Let it reach them. Let the galaxy know what happens when humans are left the wild." That night, lightning split the sky. Eli and the wild-born stood outside their fortress, watching the storm rage above them. Thunder rolled through the valley like the voice of something ancient. Anna stood beside her brother. "Do you think they'll come for us?" Eli nodded slowly. "Oh, they'll come. Humans never leave their own behind." Mira looked at him. "And the Vorcan?" Eli's expression hardened. "They'll come too, but they won't find prey this time." The rain fell harder, washing over their faces. The air smelled of smoke and steel. For the first time in years, they felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. In the distance, the Vorcan ships began to gather. The hunt was coming again, but this time it would be different. The wild-born prepared their weapons. The traps were set, the signals ready, the paths mapped. Every heartbeat echoed with purpose. And high above, the faint blue pulse of their signal still traveled through the void, heading toward human space, carry with it a simple message that would shake the stars. The lost children of humanity were alive, and they were no longer running. The signal from Vorka reached human space 24 standard days after it was sent. By then, it had already been copied, analyzed, and whispered about across hundreds of worlds. No one believed it at first. A message from children left for dead? Impossible. Vorka was a predator world, a graveyard for any living thing that wasn't born to kill. And yet, the coordinates were real. The signal code matched human technology, old but unmistakable. The Terran Alliance command gathered in a silent room. Hollow screens flickered with the message again and again. Static, then a young man's voice. "This is Eli Parker. We survived. We're coming home." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Admiral Corrin, a veteran of 100 wars, leaned forward and said the words that changed everything. "Prepare a retrieval fleet. We're bringing them back." On Vorka, Eli Parker stood at the edge of the valley, watching dark shapes move across the horizon. Vorkan warships, sleek, deadly, and burning with red light. were descending again. The storm clouds parted as their engines screamed through the sky. The ground shook. Trees bent under blast waves. Mira ran up beside him, her face streaked with ash. They're landing closer this time. I know, Eli said. His voice was calm, steady. They're not testing us anymore. They're coming to end this. The wild-born gathered at the fortress entrance. 40 humans, armed with scavenged Vorkan weapons and handmade traps. They wore armor made from the bones of predators and the metal of fallen hunters. Their eyes burned like fire in the dark. Anna stood at Eli's side, a small blade strapped to her leg. Do we run? She asked. Eli shook his head. No, we make them remember. The Vorkan soldiers landed in formation, their commander leading from the front. His armor glowed faintly under the stormlight. Around him, 100 warriors fanned out, weapons ready. He spoke through his mask, voice deep and cold. Bring me their leader, the one who calls himself human. But the forest was silent. Too silent. The Vorkan advanced slowly. Every step echoed. Every shadow seemed alive. Then, from the fog, came the first trap. A series of explosions tore through the front line. Homemade mines crafted from Vorkan power cells. Flames ripped through the ranks. The ground split open, swallowing soldiers into spike-lined pits. Screams filled the air. From above, stones and fire rained down. The humans attacked from the cliffs, moving faster than the predators could track. Spears of bone struck armor joints. Ropes of vine pulled warriors from the sky. The commander roared, They dare fight us? Eli stepped from the smoke, holding a plasma rifle stripped from a Vorkan corpse. No, he said, we're done fighting. He fired. The blast struck the commander's chest, sending him crashing into the mud. We're winning. The battle spread through the valley like wildfire. Mira led her scouts through the trees, striking fast and vanishing. Anna and Jalen cut off retreat paths, using the river's poison mist to corner enemies. The Vorkan, for all their strength, were slow to adapt. They relied on fear, and the humans had none left. Hours later, when the last Vorkan fell, the valley was quiet again. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. Rain began to fall, washing away the blood. Eli walked among the bodies, his rifle hanging at his side. Mira followed, silent. You did it, she said. He shook his head. No, we did what we had to. They'll send more. And they did. Days later, the sky split open again. But this time, the ships that arrived were not Vorkan. They were human. Massive silver vessels with blue insignias descended through the clouds. Dropships roared toward the surface, flooding the valley with light. Soldiers in sleek armor poured out, scanning for life signs. When they found the wildborn, they stopped, speechless. The soldiers they expected to rescue were gone. What they saw instead were warriors covered in scars and bone armor, eyes cold and unflinching. Eli stepped forward, his weapon lowered but ready. Who are you? He asked. The human captain removed his helmet. Commander Reyna Holt, Terran Alliance. We came for survivors. Eli stared for a long moment. Then you found them. The commander looked around at the fortress, the traps, the Vorkan corpses. You fought them? Eli nodded. We learned from them. Then we taught them fear. She exhaled slowly. God help us. The human fleet transmitted the first report within hours. The children of New Hope are alive. They are not what we expected. They have adapted beyond understanding. When the Vorkan command received news of the defeat, their high council met in silence. For centuries, no species had ever turned their own methods against them. No one had ever made the Vorkan afraid. But now they knew fear. The Vorkan commander, still scarred from the battle, stood before his superiors and spoke only one line. They are human. That is all you need to know. As dawn broke over Vorka, the wild-born stood on a mountain ledge, watching the Terran ships prepare for departure. The storm clouds finally cleared, revealing the true sky, bright and endless. Anna smiled softly. "We're going home." Eli looked down at the valley that had been their cage, their battlefield, their proving ground. "Home," he repeated quietly. "If it still feels like home." Mira stood beside him, her voice calm. "They'll never understand what we became here." "Then they'll learn," Eli said. The human commander saluted him. "You save yourselves, Parker. The galaxy will want to know how." Eli stared at the horizon. "Tell them it wasn't strength. It was survival. And once humans learn to survive." He looked up at the sky, where the ships waited. "There's no stopping us." That day, the Vorkan retreated from human space for the first time in history, not because of fleets or weapons or technology, but because of fear, the kind of fear only humans could create. The story of Vorka spread faster than light. At first, it was just a rumor, a broken transmission, whispers in dark trade stations, unconfirmed reports of a human victory on a predator world. But soon, the truth became impossible to hide. The Terran fleet had returned with survivors, and they weren't ordinary humans. The galaxy called them the Wildborn. On the day they landed on the central world of the Terran Alliance, millions gathered to see them. Cities lit up with banners, news drones filled the skies, and holoscreens played the same message over and over. After 7 years, the children of New Hope have come home. When the transport doors opened, the crowd went silent. Eli Parker stepped out first. His eyes scanned the sea of people. He still wore pieces of Vorkan armor, its dull metal scarred by battle. Behind him came Mira, Anna, Jalen, and dozens of others, each one shaped by the wild planet that had forged them. They didn't walk like victims. They walked like soldiers who had already survived the worst the universe could give. Reporters shouted questions. The crowd cheered, cried, reached out. But the wild-born didn't speak. They moved together, silent, calm, unshaken. Later, in a private meeting, the Terran Council questioned Eli. The room was bright and polished, so clean it almost hurt his eyes. He sat across from men and women in fine uniforms, their hands soft, their eyes curious. "Tell us," one of them said, "how did you survive on Vorka?" Eli looked at them for a long time before answering. "We didn't survive," he said quietly. "We became something else." The council exchanged uneasy glances. "Are you dangerous?" Another asked. Eli's expression didn't change. "Only if you try to cage us again." Far beyond human space, in the Vorkan Empire, the story hit like a storm. The hunters who had once ruled with terror were silent. Their commanders watched recordings of the battle again and again. The traps, the ambushes, the precision. None of it matched the image of fragile human prey. The Vorkan High Master stood before his warriors and spoke one truth they had never imagined saying. "The humans hunted us. The wild itself obeyed them. We will not challenge their kind again." And so, for the first time in centuries, the Vorkan ended a hunt. Across the galaxy, other species took notice. The Valari, who lived in crystal towers and measured worth by bloodline, rewrote their training doctrines. The Saruan, a reptilian race that once saw humans as simple merchants, began offering joint military treaties. Even the Silent Islands, who never spoke to outsiders, sent a message to humanity that contained only 2 words: respect earned. Everywhere, whispers grew louder. "Did you hear about the children who fought the Vorkan? They turned the Death World into their home. They sent a message to the stars and made predators run." The name human became something new, something said with caution and awe. In the following months, the wild-born were studied, honored, and celebrated. But they never sought fame. They refused to live in cities, choosing instead to settle on a quiet moon near the edge of Terran space. There, they built their own colony, half wilderness, half home. They trained others not to fight, but to endure, to adapt. Mira led survival teams. Anna taught tactics to cadets. Jalen designed traps that the military couldn't even copy. And Eli, he watched the stars every night, silent, thoughtful. One evening, Commander Raina Holt, the woman who had rescued them, visited the wild-born colony. She found Eli standing on a cliff, looking up at the sky. "They're telling your story everywhere," she said. "You become legend." Eli smiled faintly. "Legends fade. Lessons don't." Raina nodded. "So what's the lesson, then?" Eli turned to her, eyes calm and sharp. "That you don't measure humanity by comfort or safety. You measure it by what happens when everything is taken away." He looked back at the stars. "They left us with nothing, and we became more." Centuries later, long after Eli Parker was gone, the story of the Wildborn became required learning in every galactic academy. Cadets studied their tactics. Commanders repeated their words. And in the halls of alien war colleges, a simple Terran phrase was carved above every training gate. "Never hunt what learns faster than you can kill it." The Vorkan kept that phrase too. They carved it into their temples, a reminder of the one hunt they never finished. Their children grew up hearing about the small, soft species that turned fear into a weapon. And sometimes in the darkest jungles of Vorka, when the wind howled just right, the old hunters swore they could still hear human voices whispering through the trees. Not prey. Never prey. Back on the moon colony, generations later, a young cadet found an old transmitter buried beneath the roots of a tree. She dusted it off and pressed the button. The ancient device sparked to life, glowing faint blue. A voice echoed from the past, rough and calm, still carrying the power of those first survivors. "This is Eli Parker. We survived. We're coming home." The cadet smiled. She looked up at the stars, the same stars that once watched the children of New Hope fall, fight, and rise again. And somewhere out there, the galaxy remembered that humans, when left in the dark, don't break. They evolve. The legend of the Wildborn became more than a story. It became a warning carved in history. When the galaxy gave up on them, humanity did what it always does: it adapted. And across the stars, in every language, one truth remained unchanged. Never leave human children with predators, unless you want the predators to vanish.